Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel, friends. This is your Govindraj. Thank you for all your love and also support for my channel and for all your subscriptions, likes, and comments, and also sharing my previous videos to all your contacts. And today, let me give you a quick update on the new Industrial Relations Code 2020. So this code has brought many changes even compared to the original bill which was introduced in 2019. Now, as you know, all the three labor codes, which is Industrial Relations Code and Occupational Health and Safety Code and Social Security codes, have been already passed by the parliament and both the houses, and now it's waiting for the president assent to become an act. So now let's get into the details of the Industrial Relations Code 2020. See, first of all, the revised bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 20th September 2020, and as I said already, it is now passed by both the houses. The IR code that consolidates three legislations, which are Trade Union Act 1926, the IESO Act 1946, which is Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, and the Industrial Dispute Act 1947. So the provisions contained in 88 sections of all these three legislations are now spread out to 104 sections, and these are all 104 sections are spread out in 14 chapters, and all applicable definitions for the codes are brought together in the first chapter. This means for all of us, a single definition holds good for all the topics of the code, which includes trade union standing orders and industrial disputes. Now let's get into some important highlights on the definitions. There are important definitions are brought in the code, which is employee definition is introduced, and this employee definition includes supervisory and managerial staff. And there is an employer definition is also, which includes occupier and manager as employer in case of factory, and now the contractor is also included as an employer. And of course the fixed term employment is introduced, which was also available in the original bill, which is 2019 bill, and fixed term employee is eligible for all statutory benefits even though period of employment does not extend to the qualifying period of employment required in any statute. However, if you compare 2019 bill and the code now, eligibility for gratuity is only if he renders service under the contract for a period of 1 year. And the explanation to layoff definition, which was omitted in the previous bill, is now back in the code. And similarly, exclusion from the retrenchment definition for termination of the service of a worker on the ground of continued ill health is brought back in the code, which was omitted also in 2019 bill. Now, the retrenchment definition specifically excludes termination of service of the worker as a result of completion of tenure of fixed term employment. Even though it was implied in the original definition, however, now the code has specific provision in this regard. And the concerted casual leave on a given day by 50% or more workers employed in an industry also amount to strike, because the strike definition also includes this provision. And there is a new wage definition, and which is exactly same as the definition provided under the Code on Wages 2019, and with all its complexity is included in the IR code as well. And a new avatar of worker definition is introduced with few major changes, and working journalist, newspaper and sales promotion employees are included in the worker definition. Now, monthly salary ceiling for excluding the supervisors from the worker definition is set at exceeding 18K. But if you look at 2019 original bill, which was exceeding 15K, and even in the code on wages, this monthly ceiling is exceeding 15,000. Now, the worker definition includes all employees, including unorganized employees, for the purpose of chapter 3, which is basically trade union. We will talk about this more in the going ahead and also in more future videos, how this is going to affect our understanding. Now, even though contractor is included as employer, the contract labor is not specifically defined separately. And friends, there will not be any labor courts going ahead. Therefore, the schedules which define the jurisdiction matters in the ID Act have been dropped. These schedules are second and third schedule. Now let's get into some provisions which are related to grievance redressal committee or grievance redressal machinery. The provisions related to GRC actually went through a lot of changes even compared to 2019 bill and the original ID Act provisions. See, applicability for establishments having 20 or more workers is retained as it is. The maximum limit of members in the GRC is now increased to 10, which was 6 earlier. And adequate representation of women workers in proportion to the total women workers employed is required. Earlier, this was made as far as practicable, it was not so mandatory. Now this is becoming a specific provision, and the right of worker to raise industrial dispute out of individual grievances is now quite altered. And the application before the GRC, which is grievance redressal committee, to be filed within 1 year from the date of cause of action, which was actually 3 years in the 2019 bill. And the dispute due to dismissal, discharge, retrenchment, or termination will be an industrial dispute even when there is no collective nature of the dispute. It's not new to the law, but however, now it is provided under grievance redressal machinery chapter. Now the worker can take up the dispute before the tribunal for adjudication of his grievance or dispute after expiry of 45 days from the date of application to conciliation, and the limitation of 2 years is set in the case of individual disputes arising out of discharge, dismissal, retrenchment, or otherwise termination of service. And if you look at this limitation, was not so specifically available in the case of industrial dispute. Now the code specifically provides limitation of 2 years in case of individual disputes arising out of discharge, dismissal, retrenchment, or otherwise termination of service. And this limitation runs from the date of discharge, dismissal, retrenchment, or otherwise termination of service. Now let's look into the trade union provisions. See, if you look at originally the Trade Union Act 1926 and especially section 4.1, the proviso to section 4.1 mandated for registration at least 10% or 100 of the workmen, whichever is less, engaged or employed in the establishment or industry with which it is connected should be the members of such trade union on the date of making application for registration. And this proviso is also retained and in the code also section 6.2 of the code. Now there is another proviso which was for the section 4.1 of the trade union. This made it mandatory for registration to have minimum 7 persons as its members who are workmen engaged or employed in the establishment or industry with which it is connected. And this has been dropped in the new code. And if you look at section 9A of the Trade Union Act 1926, this mandated for a registered trade union to maintain at all times at least 10% or 100 of the workmen, whichever is less, subject to a minimum of 7 engaged or employed in an establishment or industry with which it is connected as its members. And this provision is also retained in the code under section 6.4 of the code. However, it may be noted that the criteria of minimum 7 members for registration is omitted, which is the second proviso to section 4.1 of the Trade Union Act. What is the understanding for us? The understanding for us is, while registration, maintaining minimum 7 members who are connected to the industry is not mandatory. However, after the registration, the trade unions are required to maintain the 7 members who are connected. So, this may have certain implications we will address in the future videos, friends. Now, in the trade union chapter, the negotiating council or negotiating union concept has been brought. Now, the code mandates to recognize the registered trade union in the establishment for negotiating with the employer. How to recognize if there is only one union, multiple union are all addressed in detail in the code. And there is also a validity period for the recognition which is also provided in the code. The code also says that the facilities to be provided by industrial establishment to a negotiating union or negotiating council. Now, if you look at the Trade Union Act 1926, there were three important immunities or rights of a registered trade union were provided under section 17, 18 and 19, and these provisions are now contained in section 16, immunity from civil suit in certain cases, section 17, criminal conspiracy in furtherance of objects of trade union, and section 18, enforceability of agreements. These are all provisions are retained as it is without any change in the code. Now, let's get into the chapter Standing Orders Act or Standing Orders chapter, which is a separate chapter in the code. Now, let's talk about applicability of the standing orders, which is provided in section 28 under the code. See, the provisions of the standing orders are applicable to establishments having 300 or more workers, whereas it was 100 or more in the IESO Act, which is Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. Now, the state governments have no power to extend this to establishments having less than 300, which was very much available in the earlier Act 1946. And also, there is no application of the chapter if the number of workers reduced to less than 300, as this provision is dropped in the new code compared to the 2019 bill. And going ahead, friends, power to prescribe model standing orders. So far, if you look at, every state used to have their own model standing orders, which is prepared and published by the state governments. Now, this possibility or this provision rests with the central government instead of the appropriate government, which was provided in the old act, which is IESO Act 1946. And there are also deemed certification provisions are provided under the code if the employer adopts the model standing orders. However, in this case, the information is required to be provided to the certifying officer. And if you look at how and what is the time limit for completion of disciplinary proceedings, the time limit is also provided in case of suspension pending inquiry, both investigation and inquiry to be completed ordinarily within 90 days from the date of suspension. Friends, if you are aware, there is no legislative provision limiting the time for completion of disciplinary proceedings in case of suspension pending inquiry. However, there is a Supreme Court guideline or direction in this regard. Other than that, there is no legislation. Now the code mandates that both investigation and inquiry should be completed ordinarily within 90 days from the date of suspension. Now let's look into notice of change, which is very important for all of us, for all professionals who are in the industrial relations domain. And these provisions of notice of change are continued in the code, which are section 40 and 41. However, there are few more additional exceptions are provided. See, in this case, notice is not required in case of emergent situation which requires change of shift or shift working otherwise than in accordance with the standing orders. However, for this, a consultation with grievance redressal committee is necessary before such change, and no notice is also required if such change is effected in accordance with the orders of the appropriate government. Now let's look into how the resolution of industrial dispute is provided under the code. If you want me to comment on this, the mechanism for resolution of industrial dispute has undergone a major surgery, because if you look at what is the current mechanism, there is a conciliation officer, there is a board of conciliation, there is a court of inquiry, there is a labor court, and there is an industrial tribunal, and there is a national tribunal as well. However, and there is a provision for voluntary arbitration also in the original legislation, which is Industrial Dispute Act 1947. Now let's look into what is IR code is talking about it. If you look at the Board of Conciliation and Court of Inquiry and Labor Courts are getting vanished, and only the Conciliation Officer, Industrial Tribunal and National Industrial Tribunal are going to be there in the days ahead, as there are no provisions with related to these three modes of resolution of industrial disputes. And of course, the voluntary arbitration methodology is continued with some changes. Let's look into certain provisions of industrial tribunals. See, the industrial tribunal will now have two members. One is judicial member and another one is administrative members. What matters can be handled by a bench and individually are all prescribed in the code, and how the decision are to be made also explained in detail. And if you look at, there is no reference of disputes from the government going ahead which was available under the ID Act. The appropriate government had the possibility to refer the dispute to the labor court or industrial tribunal when it receives the report from the conciliation officer or when it thinks so. So now this is not available. The matters unsettled by the conciliation officer can be taken to the industrial tribunal by the parties within 90 days from the date of receipt of report. You can look into section 53. You can find this provision. Let's briefly look into strikes and lockouts provisions. See, the general prohibitions on strikes and lockouts are contained in section 62 and 63 of the code. Now the concept of public utility service has been dropped, and accordingly schedule 1 of the ID Act lost the relevance. Now the restrictions placed on public utility services on strikes and lockouts have been extended to all cases for all industrial establishment and all workers union. And there cannot be any strikes or lockout without giving a notice. There are two riders. The first rider is 60 days notice before strike or lockout is necessary. And this was 6 weeks even in the original bill and also in the ID Act. Or another rider is they cannot go on strike or lockout within 14 days from the date of notice. These two riders are going to be there in every cases irrespective of the industrial establishment, whether it is a public utility service or not. And of course, there is no strike or lockout during the pendency of conciliation or adjudication proceedings. This provision is continued. Now let's look into our favorite chapter, which is layoff, retrenchment and closure, which is basically chapter 5A and 5B in the Industrial Dispute Act. Now we will talk about what are the changes which are especially chapter 5A, now which is chapter 9. See, the provision to rehire retrenched employees is slightly modified in the chapter 9. And now the code says employer is required to consider the retrenched employees only if he wishes to rehire any person within 1 year of such retrenchment. This 1 year period was not there in the original act, which is ID Act 1947. And the compensation is not payable for the closure of mining operations due to exhaustion of minerals if the alternate employment is provided. In this case, the radius of alternate employment was not there in the Industrial Dispute Act 1947. Now it is introduced. The alternate employment is required to be provided within a radius of 20 kilometers. This is the new change. Barring these two changes, there are no changes in chapter 5A or the chapter 9 now in the Industrial Relations Code 2020. Now let's get into the provisions which are related to chapter 5E in the original ID Act, now the chapter 9. So there are very important changes which is the employer should be happy for this. The first change is the special provisions are made applicable to establishments having 300 or more workers. See, if I have to explain you very briefly, if the industrial establishment is a factory, plantation or mine, for any retrenchment, layoff or closure, there is a permission is required from the appropriate government. Now, because of this applicability, the special provisions are made applicable to establishments having 300 or more workers. the establishments who have less than 300, which is very precisely 299 and below, are not required to go to government for permission for leave of retrenchment and closure. The possibility to increase this threshold is available in the hands of appropriate government. Now it is specifically provided. And the power of state governments to apply these provisions related to closure to seasonal establishment under this chapter is dropped. Now the state governments or the appropriate, especially the state government, has no power to apply these provisions to seasonal establishment in the case of closure. Now, the appropriate government will have the possibility to alter or vary the compensation in case of retrenchment and closure. So, the appropriate government can make provision for this, and these changes have been brought in. Other than this, there are no changes. However, these changes are very important for the employers and which also benefits. Now, there is a new chapter, new concept, which is worker reskilling fund is introduced under section 83 of the code. That the appropriate government is required to set up the fund. The employer is required to contribute an amount equal to 15 days wages last drawn or such other number of days as may be notified by the central government of every retrenched worker immediately before the retrenchment or closure. So this is a new addition in the code, and the contributions from some other sources can also be pooled as may be notified by the appropriate government. And this fund will be used to credit 15 days wages for a retrenched worker within 45 days of such retrenchment. I don't understand what is the purpose of this reskilling fund. If at all, if the government is going to credit 15 days wages for a retrenched worker within 45 days of such retrenchment, the provision would have been made in the Industrial Relations Code for another 15 days of wages additionally. That would have solved the problem. However, the government may come up with certain more provisions by way of rules how this fund will get utilized. Now let's quickly get into some of the other changes. If you look at the penalties and punishments, of course there are graded penalties and punishments are provided in the code, and provisions for compounding or composition of offences are also provided, and even the offences which attracts imprisonment can also be compounded. And provisions of section 33 of ID Act, which is basically altering or varying conditions of service during the pendency of proceedings with any authorities. Now these provisions, including which are related to protected workmen, are all continued under section 90 of the code without any change. And the schedule under the IESO Act, which is Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, now forms part of the code as first schedule, and the fifth schedule of ID Act now forms part of the code as second schedule, which is related to unfair labor practices. And what is ghost law is now defined in the second schedule for clarity purpose. And the fourth schedule of ID Act, which is related to notice of change, is now form part of the code as third schedule. And all other schedules are dropped as they have lost the relevance now. So there are many more changes, friends. I can say there are plethora of changes, and which all requires detailed analysis and interpretation, and also we need to get into specifics of this act. However, my objective is to provide a quick updates and major highlights and changes in this short video. Thank you all for your support, and also watching my channel and viewing all my previous videos, your subscriptions, likes and comments. And if this knowledge is worth and useful to you, please do share, comment, like and subscribe the channel for more updates on labor codes, labor law, labor relations and industry news. Thank you very much, friends, and see you soon. Be safe.